Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of the Pub Test. My name is Neil Farrow and I'm here, with my co-host Erin Watson. And we're doing a little bit of a recap of an episode. So we were very lucky that we recently recorded an episode talking about the royal family. And of course, a lot has changed for the royal family in the past week. In fact, it was the prince formerly known as Prince Andrew, now known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, who on his birthday on the 19th of February, which is also my birthday, I must say, was arrested and spent 11 or 12 hours in jail. And so this little recap is touching base on all of the things that Andrew has gotten up to in the previous couple of years and the last week in particular. But we kick this off with a bit of reflections from Erin, who, when we recorded the episode on the royal family, was definitely in a fangirl moment over the contribution the royal family has made. Now, Erin, has your opinion changed given the last week with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor?
I'm not sure that it was about being a fangirl over the contribution of the royal family. I think it was a fangirl mostly over the fashion choices and sartorial choices of the royal family, and my obsession with the royal fashion Instagram algorithm. I don't know if you've got down that rabbit hole yet, Neil, but my general the reason I know what's going on with the royal family is 110% to do with the royal fashion. I love it. I think it's fascinating. Every little piece is chosen in such a particular way. I think, yeah, that's my love of the royal family versus their contribution over time.
To civil society. So, look, one of my favourite photos appeared in the past week, obviously off the back of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor being arrested. This is a familiar photo for the royal family, and we'll make sure we include it on the YouTube link and online, because it seems there's a number of British, including Prince Andrew's father, who was caught in a similar pose, as was Theresa May, I think, and a variety of others. So it's a uniquely British pose when people are clearly in trouble. So let's do a little bit of a recap, first of all, of the history of royal family members being arrested, beheaded, and everything in between. So obviously we had Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. As a good Republican, I'm having a little sniggle in the background, but he was not the first royal family member to actually be in trouble with the law. We've had a number of royal family members, including Charles I, King Edward II, even Princess Anne has had a bump in with the law over the period of time, as has Prince Philip. But interestingly enough, one of the more Australian connections to Prince Andrew, or Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's recent arrest, was on a visit when he was here a number of years ago. Now, he was travelling from Australia to New Zealand, and of course our good airport security staff insisted that he undertake a security screening, to which he refused. Now, he was then politely told that if he is not screened, he will not be boarding the aircraft. A slight kerfuffle later, and he finally submitted, or was opted in to allow the security screening to take place, and his flight continued, albeit slightly delayed. So even with an Australian connection, we have the prince formerly known as Andrew, who has been in trouble with the law. But recapping over time, the most interesting relatively recent run-in with the law was actually Princess Anne. So Princess Anne was given a speeding offence at the age of 21. And again, 5 years later, another speeding offence. Having not learned the lesson the first time, she was actually banned from driving on top of her fine for the second occasion. So Princess Anne has definitely had a few run-ins with the law, but none of them seem to be of the level of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Now, Erin, would you like to give us any bit of a recap as to what happened with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor on his birthday
I think everyone was shocked by what happened, not because that he didn't deserve it or anything like that, but because of the circumstances under which he was arrested. Because I find with this whole Epstein thing, there's a bit of irony that the only person in prison over this is a woman. Epstein has been able to take the perhaps easier road out of this. And so when Prince Andrew was arrested, I thought it was quite interesting. So it relates to what happened while he was in a government appointment, right? So we had this trade envoy role. So as a royal, very difficult to arrest him for anything he's done wrong as a royal, but this was like a way to wedge him and to actually have some kind of consequences by using this time as trade envoy. And I think what's happened is he's sent documents to Jeffrey Epstein while he was in that role, confidential documents. So that's the bit that they have been able to wedge him on. And it just seems that the unraveling from here is getting worse and worse and worse. Like I was looking at the papers this morning, and it looks like London police or what are they called?
Scotland Yard, was it? Or
Protection officers. That's
protection
right. Because
officers?
I think their status as international protected people. Like I know Kate Middleton, because again, I've been reading Royal Fashion. I was reading about her international protection status, is the only reason I know this. And so there were officers who actually guarded a party in New York with Jeffrey Epstein. So, I think that now it's like that arrest kind of gives permission for a lot of this stuff to really unravel. And it's interesting the reflection you had on the time that Epstein was asked to go through, sorry, not Epstein, former Prince Andrew was asked to go through security in Australia, because conversely, if you look at the way that the king has responded, he's basically saying everyone is equal under the law, as is everybody equal under the law of whatever the law is for airport security. And it just goes to show that entitlement and that difference between Prince Andrew and King Charles. Although King Charles might not even, we don't know what he's thinking right now, but he has no choice, because the royal family is probably at their absolute weakest point right now because of Prince Andrew.
And so a lot of this, Erin, as you've alluded to, has kind of come undone off the back of the Epstein files. So specifically, this charge relates to the fact that there was a mass dumping of documents by Donald Trump in the US. A fair number of them were redacted. Still curious to know what's in those redacted documents.
Yep.
But the BBC actually picked together that through those files, there was a number of emails and correspondence back and forth between Epstein and then the time Prince Andrew, while he was acting in a trade envoy capacity. And so sort of the Epstein files is this kind of gift that keeps on giving for the media around endless stories, endless connections. Obviously, we've seen with Prince Andrew, the forced banishment, the removal of his titles. There's now a discussion as to whether he should be removed from the chain of
the line of succession.
line
because
of
he's
succession.
still number 8. Yes, even though he's not a prince, he's still number 8 in the line of succession, which is baffling.
And that would actually require Australia to legislate as well, I discovered over the weekend. So every country that has the king or queen as head of state would have to do its own legislation to adjust the line of succession, which is an interesting local connection and potentially an argument here for why Australia should potentially cut its ties with the royal family and keep the Governor-General or an equivalent.
If there was a political moment, Neil, absolutely, because what you'll have, if there's legislation that has to be changed, there's still a whole bunch of monarchists in Parliament. There's a whole bunch of Republicans in Parliament. It will become a political issue if there's legislative change. Like, I don't think it's something that the government can just walk through Parliament and then it's got to go through the Senate. So we'll walk through the lower house and the Senate and then back again. If there ever was, because I think when we initially talked about the royal family, we were like, is Australia going to be a republic? Absolutely not. It's just the wrong time. It's not bipartisan, all of this kind of stuff. But if there ever was a moment to wedge this issue through the Australian Parliament, that's probably going to be it. Because why are we sort of, yes, on one hand, it gets rid of Andrew, but then it would be that existential question for Australians about, well, why do we even have a royal family in the first place? So, it's funny how things can change very, very quickly. What do you think? Do you reckon there'd be enough public sentiment to kind of get something like that through?
Look, I think it's an interesting one, particularly off the back of obviously the lack of success we've had with constitutional change in Australia and sort of would there be enough impetus to do more? I think it'll be interesting, obviously, if this goes to trial, and it's going to be quite a substantial crime to charge against. So the threshold is relatively high for this particular offence. So it'll be an interesting one, but even the court case and the potential damage that will flow from there. But I think it has been an evolution, and you alluded to Charles's comments, King Charles, over the evolution of what is known previously as sovereign immunity or royal immunity, where previously they were all untouchable, and now it's looking like Charles's response is probably more in line with the times. Nobody's actually above the law, but it does create some unprecedented legal jeopardy. So as you've noted, he's already 8th in line to the throne. Not that we're anticipating any sort of mass events that would adjust that, but if there was a catastrophic event, he could potentially be the King of England relatively soon, if that were to occur. And obviously that has severe implications because he would then get royal immunity. So look, I think is the
Then we'd
groundswell
be
there?
a republic, Neil.
I was going to say that would definitely tip us into Republic territory very, very quickly. I'm not sure the groundswell is there yet, but it will be interesting to see sort of does it continue to build and I think King Charles has tried his best to hemorrhage the bleeding from the royal family and the brand, but who knows where this will end.
And they've got to, I think one of the things that I found really interesting over the last few days is just how, like, they're going with the business as usual approach. So he put out that statement, then he went to a big fashion event, like maybe it's London Fashion Week or something like that. But of course, fashion, that's why I saw it. So he went to this big, it was a Vogue event from memory. It was like on Friday, whatever day it was. And then you'll see that Kate and William went to the BAFTAs for the first time in several years as well. So then the front page of the paper automatically becomes Kate's outfit and what Kate is wearing and the two of them together. Like, they know that that's the power that they have over the British media. So it changes the story from Andrew on the front page. And if you just do a very quick Google of Andrew, it is all over every single major newspaper everywhere and all of the analysis that comes from that. So a big conversation is obviously about Princess Beatrice and Eugenie, who are the daughters, who are, have been horrifically treated through this as well. And then, but should they face consequences? I also can't help, now I haven't seen analysis to this effect yet, but I also can't help but wonder if part of, someone like Harry's little gripe and wanting to get away from being funded by the British public, and others, is that, has he done something wrong, or he knew about all of this and he was like, I want nothing to do with these people because I know how bad it's going to be.
And Harry's made some interesting comments in relation to his uncle Andrew. In the book The Spare, he discusses the contrast between the fact that, Andrew was embroiled in the Epstein saga, was dealing with or close to quite a few nefarious characters, and yet still kept his security detail. And just because Harry wanted to leave, being an active royal, he lost his security detail. So Harry's actually been very sharp historically around talking about the differences there, but has been very quiet on this issue. So to your point there, is it a no, or what, did he want to know, or sort of why is Harry so
I
quiet?
reckon he probably knew. I mean, I don't think that this could have happened at that scale without him knowing, and without, because he was very close to one of the daughters as well. There were often pictures of her going to visit them in Canada and the US. So I think that they absolutely probably did know, and he's pointing out the hypocrisy, but he's not telling you the full story in Spare. It's a great book. I really enjoyed it. Obviously, we were all there to hear about Meghan, but most of it is to do with his service in the military, which is quite interesting to read about. He's quite, open and stuff there. And I don't know. Like, I feel like he can't have not known, and that's probably part of what made them so angry, is how much Andrew was protected, because Andrew, as we all know, was the Queen's favourite.
Favorite son.
Meg asked me one night, "You don't think they'll ever pull our security, do you?" Never. Not in this climate of hate, and not after what happened to my mother. Also, not in the wake of my Uncle Andrew. He was embroiled in a shameful scandal, accused of the sexual assault of a young woman, and no one had so much as suggested that he lose his security. Whatever grievances people had against us, sex crimes weren't on the list.
Someone did write in the papers the other day, and I think it might have been Latika Burke or someone like that, wrote that, you're still not allowed to quite criticise the Queen. Like, it's a little bit of out of fashion and out of taste to do that. However, she did do a lot of protecting of Andrew. And the only reason I think that all of this is unravelling now is partly maybe because she's not here, and King Charles is allowing it to happen, because there are a lot of things that they could do to stop this. But he is sort of giving permission for rule of law to take its course. And as you say, that's partly about modernising. Like, they have to kind of move with the times. If they're seen to be above the law, then it is off with their heads.
And is it a history of Charles's? So Charles the First was the first monarch arrested, executed, I think, in the end. His son, Charles II, re-established the Merry Monarch, but was quite a ladies' man, for want of a better term, numerous mistresses, the reopening of theatres, witty and hedonistic. And now we have Charles III on the throne, continuing that line. So it'll be an interesting story to see how everything goes. But on this occasion, would you have a beer or would you catch up with the prince formerly known as Prince Andrew, now Mountbatten Windsor? Here's an interesting one for you.
You
Pub
know,
test
plot
with
plot twist,
Andrew.
plot twist, Neil. I think most times throughout this podcast, it like doesn't matter who the dictator is, doesn't matter who the war criminal is. I kind of don't. I really, really don't. I don't want to have a beer with him. I think he's clearly a very awful person. And I think that he's been protected in ways that are just, it really goes to the power of rich and connected men around the world. And I'm sorry, but like that's, yes, there's Ghislaine Maxwell involved in this as well. So, but it does go to show the connections of rich and powerful. And like I would just be like my skin would crawl having a beer with him.
Yeah.
Total cringe. I actually think I got invited to one of the Pitch at Palace events when it was in Australia, and I couldn't go for some reason, and I'm so glad I never did because like ew. And I just I really that he's probably look. I think I'd have a beer with Putin. I'd have a beer with Kim Jong Un. Because there's a different side to the story. We discussed that previously. There's no other side to this story. You're a bad person. Neil, are you gonna have a beer with Andrew? I think this is
in what is a pub test first, both of us thumbs down for a beer with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. So yeah, definitely does not pass the pub test. I'm sure we'll be speaking and hearing more about this as it continues to drag into the weeks and months ahead. And do definitely support on this occasion Charles's very strong response that nobody is above the law.